Welcome to Suncoast in Depth. My name is Brett Watson, and I'm here with Ricardo Aviles, and we're going to close out this series that we've called Reconstruction Junction. And what I thought we should do to close it out is talk about just practical things that a person can do to make the process of rebuilding a more sustainable faith easier. So when you think of that, are there things that you put into play during your deconstruction and then reconstruction that stand out above the rest that helped you through that process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to just open up and say thank you for pouring your heart and soul into doing these podcasts. This series has been incredible just to hear all the different stories. Because a lot of times we live in a vacuum when we're going through a deconstruction. And so knowing that so many people kind of have a very similar story and a similar hurdles that they have to jump through. And so I've loved this series. So thank you for doing that. And
I love doing it. And I hope that it helps people to not only know that somebody else is going through this, but that there's a positive route for going through it. Yeah. So,
because there's plenty of deconstruction stories out there that end in no reconstruction.
Yeah.
And so knowing that there is hope and there rebuilding of what is it that you like to say? Not a stable faith.
Sustainable
faith. There it is. Right there in the graphic.
Yeah, because stable wouldn't be the thing, would it?
No. You're right. Yeah.
There's bound to be change.
Yeah. So I would say for this process, kind of like what I opened up with, doing this in a vacuum, I would highly, highly recommend not. And that's what makes me thankful for Suncoast, because it's one of those places that you can be honest. I see so many Christians, worship leaders, Christian artists, that you could tell they're really struggling with their faith. They have a lot of questions.
You can see it in their lyrics.
You can see it in their lyrics, but they're not. I don't know that they have a place that they feel safe to open up about their questions and their deconstruction. So having a place like Suncoast or a community like Suncoast, to where you can kind of go through this journey. And the beautiful thing is you have people that are on the other side of it, that you can ask questions and give you hope.
Yeah.
So that would be the biggest thing, is just like, don't do this alone. Like, utilize the resource of this community.
That's tough to do, though, for a lot of people, because, not tough to, well, yeah, it's tough to do if you are already in a community where you don't have that freedom.
Correct.
But you still have people there that you love.
Yeah.
That you know are going to react in ways that aren't good for the relationship to this deconstruction process.
Yeah. No, we learned that the hard way, for sure.
So just talk a little bit about, maybe even tell a story of that kind of thing playing out in your relationships, and what I know that you've been good about maintaining a lot of those relationships,
sure,
despite your differences.
Yeah.
So just kind of tell us a story.
I want to tell it in a way that I don't single anybody out. So I'll speak in generalities, but there's this term, you find out who you want in your foxhole. Mm-hmm. And so it's a military term. There are people that you want in your foxhole that will always have your back no matter what you do or going through or whatever. And there's some people that you don't. And anytime there's this kind of shift in paradigm, or a situation that you may be going through, or a situation that you messed up, and the people that stand by you no matter what, even if they don't agree with what you did or what you believe, those are the people that you want to keep in your foxhole.
So sometimes you have to make tough decisions.
100%. Yeah. And no matter what, I will always lead with love, or at least attempt to lead with love. I don't harbor any sort of anger or resentment. I think when we're scared, we act in ways that we're not proud of, for sure. And I think for a vast majority of the people that kind of left and excommunicated us, or at least Laura and I personally, I just think that they were reacting out of fear. So when you can view it that way, it makes it much less like, I can't believe they would do this. Like, our friendship means nothing to them. Like,
yeah.
I try to have the compassionate view of like, they were afraid and they are still afraid. And I hope one day that they find peace and lose that fear of getting this wrong, because that's not a great way to have your spiritual life. Like, that's not a good place for your spiritual life to be, is like completely rooted in fear. Yeah. There's this, I've talked about it before, but there's something that I strive for. There's authoritarian and authoritative. Some leaders lead from an authoritarian perspective of like, you do as I say and don't question.
Yeah.
And then there's authoritative, which, let me show you the way. I'm going to be right there with you as we do this. And it's much more of a respected leadership perspective, because people know, like, no matter what, my leader's got my back, and they're leading in a way that they're not going to ask me to do anything that they haven't done themselves or are willing to do themselves. And so I think that's where it's like, I try to view God as like, not this authoritarian,
right?
Do as I say or else you'll burn in hell forever. But I view God as an authoritative leader, in the sense that he sent Jesus down to show what this life is about and what your connection should be with God and what you should prioritize in this life, by literally the ultimate example.
And like it kind of ties into what you were saying about trying to be understanding so that you don't take things personally. You can see that in the stories about Jesus, right? He even hanging on the cross, he's saying, forgive them.
Right.
Right. He always seemed to be striving to understand the other rather than overtake the other, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that's a good example to follow. And it does leave you, on the practical side of that, it does leave you in a position where you are not as apt to take things personally, personal rejection,
right?
And just see it from a better perspective. I like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's just bound to happen if you go through a deconstruction. Especially if you were raised in church, and a lot of your community is your church community. It's bound to happen that somebody's going to, if you're honest with your beliefs and your questions, like, somebody's going to get scared, and they may cut their relationship off with you.
Yeah. And
my hope is that one day, there is a change of heart and a realization, like, okay, maybe everything I do believe is not 100% accurate or a good representation of God or Jesus and what this all means. But Jesus never called us to be certain about what we believe. That's been a fabrication of the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Bible doesn't, in general. Like, it just doesn't. And
especially New Testament.
Yeah, and it especially doesn't tell you to... Jesus never told us to reject the person that doesn't believe what we believe, or excommunicate them, or anything like that.
No.
He tells us to love everyone above the law. And if you're a Christ follower, if you call yourself a Christian, and the ultimate example is Jesus, and I think most Christians would believe that and agree, like, our ultimate example of how we should be living is represented through Christ. When he's asked, what's the greatest law? He says, love. Yeah. Above all else, love. Not just Christians, not just people who hold your same political or ideological beliefs. He just says, love everyone. And that's why I love when Troy says that, like, love everyone, period.
Yep.
There's no subtext to that.
No. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the simple side of the Christian message.
Yeah.
Just love. That's it.
And it's the hardest commandment to do.
Yeah, that was my next comment.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So that's the relational side of things, and I think that's really good advice.
Right.
The other side to it is the inner turmoil that has maybe, not so much to do with other people in your life that may be scared and reject you, so to speak, because of your change in beliefs. But just wrestling with yourself, laying there in bed at night and not being able to sleep because you're just not sure, like, what the hell am I supposed to believe?
Right.
Right? What helped you in those scenarios? Or did you even have those scenarios?
No, I definitely did. And talking with you guys, so to go back to the relationship side, talking with you guys really helped. Not knowing that I wasn't alone in this, really, really helped. And those are like very common thoughts.
Yeah. We might even go so far as to say that everybody has thoughts like that.
I think if you're really honest with yourself,
Yeah.
I think it's impossible with how connected, how much information is out there.
Yeah.
It was really easy to live in an echo chamber 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Very easy. You just
Very
had
difficult now.
Very difficult now to think that your ideas are what everybody believes.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not the case anymore. So I think there is like this awakening to the understanding, like, okay, there's different paradigms out there. So it's almost like it's like too much information to where it's like, I don't know what to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is such like an individualized like process,
Yes, it's become very individualized.
Yeah. And so there's, for me at least, there's this great line in a song that Chase sent me a couple weeks ago, or this week, not a couple weeks ago. And it was my story written down. It should have been the song that I wrote. But one of the main lines is, "The Holy Ghost keeps haunting me." And I really like that line because it's like, even through everything, it's like I couldn't let it go. I just couldn't. There were too many things that I'm like, there's something here. There's something here. And like, I'm watching this, it's like a docuseries called Life on Our Planet. Mm-hmm. It's a new one that Netflix just released.
Yeah, that looks good.
It's so good. And Morgan Freeman is the narrator. So it's just super, it's great to fall asleep to. But I'm just watching this, like, they literally start from the conception of life on Earth and like how life came to be and all of these like miraculous moments in the story of Earth and life on our planet. And I'm just like, some people look at that and they're like, oh, that's a case against God. And I just wholeheartedly disagree, because there were so many miraculous moments in the story of life on Earth that I'm just like, this screams God. This screams something so much larger than just these, oh, it just kind of happened.
I'm a fairly skeptical guy, right?
Yeah.
And so when when people would argue for the fine tuning of the universe as evidence for a creator, I had to do my due diligence and looked for the arguments against that. And I'll just tell you that in my efforts, I have yet to find a good argument against fine tuning.
Yeah. Fine
tuning meaning, there are so many little miracles that came into place at the right time, the right place. The analogy that's used is, if you were to have a measuring system where the smallest unit of measurement was the width of a proton, and you were to change any of the four fundamental forces in the universe that govern the universe by the width of one proton, the universe as we know it could not exist. Any four, just pick one.
Yeah.
Gravity, strong nuclear force, whatever, just pick one. And I've yet to find a good argument against that.
Yeah.
They, in fairness, the people that I did listen to and read, they were quick to admit that it is a difficult thing to refute. It certainly looks, it's very understandable that people attribute this to a design.
Yeah.
So they did admit that. They're scientists.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of reasons to believe if you need that.
But and outside of solid arguments against atheism, like I don't really care about that. Like if you don't want to believe in God, it's fine. Like, just don't judge me for believing in God.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I ask. Or don't make me feel like I'm stupid.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that there, like you said, there isn't a solid argument against, at least against the idea of a creator. That's why I think, even though I respect them, like I think that what's his name? The guy that wrote God Delusion.
Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins attacks religion. He doesn't attack God. And I think religion has its issues.
There are plenty of straw men to
100%
tackle there. Yeah.
100%. But I think that there's just too many for instances in my life that screams a universal connection. And I think that universal connection is God.
Right. So that's something I wanted to point out, because as we're talking about these reasons, this evidence for a creator, which is important to some people. It was for me for many years.
Oh yeah. No, at the beginning of my deconstruction, I had to what's the argument for a creator?
Yes.
I need that certainty.
Yeah. But I would venture to say that a lot of people get to a place where that's no longer the issue.
It's not for me anywhere.
And something that you said earlier about the song, "The Holy Ghost Keeps Haunting Me."
Yeah.
I love that too. I can't wait to hear that song. Yeah. What is happening because of this information overload and the ability to look into these things and question your paradigms of belief is people are becoming more individualistic about their spirituality. And I think that's a good thing, because not that we don't need community. God, I don't want to say that. That's so important for all the reasons that you stated earlier and many more.
Yeah.
But the upside to this individuality in spirituality is that you are put in positions where you have to engage with that creator personally. Mm. And there are all kinds of spiritual, I wanted to say forces, but I don't mean that like angels and demons kind of thing. But there's all kinds of cultural forces that are pushing people to look inwardly, like mindfulness meditation, for example.
Yeah.
12-step programs, you name it. I mean, there's just so many avenues now that we didn't have centuries ago. Mm-hmm. That help people to stop and look inwardly. It's more difficult than ever to do that, because you just have a lot of distractions as well. But you do have these other forces pushing you to look inwardly. And I would like to be one of those forces.
Yeah.
Because what I think most people run into in their deconstruction is they'll either throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater and then they just live a physical, materialistic kind of existence, or they hunt for some level of spirituality in other ways and they're looking more inwardly, right? And when a person does that, again, I'm stepping out on a limb here, but I would say that you're practically guaranteed to have an encounter when you do that. Now, call it what you want. Call it your higher self if you want to. I don't really care. Call it God. Call it the universe, as many people want to call it the universe. If you stop and you begin that process through contemplation, meditation, prayer, you're going to have an encounter, and those experiences will add up to be something significant enough that you don't care anymore about the arguments, the apologetic arguments for the existence of God, because your experiences just land you there more and more.
Yeah.
So that I would really encourage people to take up some practice, even if it's just 5 minutes a day.
100%.
Just walking, listening to a song that moves you. All of us have, as human beings, we all have this thing with music, right?
And that was something I was going to add, is like I have the honor of every weekend being in a worship experience. So it's not just like I have my own kind of moments with God in those songs. But I also see people having those moments as well. So I get to
Which
see,
enhances your own moment.
exactly.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So it's a really cool and unique honor that I have.
Yeah.
And so it's like those moments with the Holy Ghost just keeps haunting me. It's just like, I know you're there. I don't know what you are, but I know you're there. It's like, I don't know. There's something to our connectiveness. There's something that I think that this glue that kind of binds us all together. I think there's a lot of beauty in the mystery. There's a lot of beauty in the undefined. And part of me never wants to know,
Right.
Part of me wants that mystery to stay a mystery.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
So this is another important piece, I think, for rebuilding something that's sustainable, is just living in the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. Being honest, being intellectually honest.
As honest as you can be.
As
right?
honest as you can be. Right. And that's good too, man,
Right.
because it's hard to do that.
Right.
Okay. But work at that, chip away at your self-delusion. The moment you can muster the courage to admit that some of your beliefs are just, what's the word I can use without being, I don't want to be derogatory in any way. I really don't.
Sustainable.
Yes. That you have beliefs that are unsustainable.
Yeah.
You have facts stacked against your
Right.
your certain beliefs, certain bricks in the wall, if you will.
And if it's a belief that you feel in your heart, is not, but your outward, there's a lot of pressure to maintain a certain belief structure.
Yes.
Especially if you work at a church, you're heavily involved at a church. All of your communities at a church.
Your
at
income
a church
comes from the church.
Exactly. There's a lot of outside pressure that keeps you in that place. Even if you're honest with yourself enough, but you can't really vocalize that or really wrestle with it outwardly.
And just so I know this just sounds like a shameless plug for the church, but there's no way for me to express the level of gratitude I have to work in a place that allows for that allows for free thinking, disagreement, where you can have open discussion about this. And I can't tell you how many people in the group that gathers on Sundays after church, Suncoast in depth, 12 o'clock on Sundays, how many people have said that?
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that we can talk about this stuff here.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like anybody's going to condemn me for it. So many people.
Yeah.
That is so valuable. If you can find a community like that. I know that everybody that, listens to this, maybe they don't have Suncoast near them. It's not practical to be here, but for those who do, I can't recommend the place enough.
Yeah.
I don't know where I would go if I weren't here. I really don't. On so many levels. But anyway, the moment that you can muster the courage to admit that some of your beliefs are unsustainable is very scary. And it may even be that fear may even linger for a while. But in that moment, you'll also have a kind of relief, at least in my experience.
Same. Yeah.
So you'll have the fear, but you'll have a sense of relief. And it's not until that moment that you can begin to build something that is sustainable, right? That's more principles based. Troy did such a dynamite job a couple of Sundays ago talking about the Bible, and he used as an example of contradiction in the Bible who was it that made it to the tomb first,
right.
On that first Sunday, and that all the Gospels say somebody different, right? And then pointing out that, look, the details are different. Just admit it. That's just a reality. You can read it yourself.
Right. It's not us lying.
No. But that's not what's important there.
Right.
What is important is the common thread that they all hold, that the tomb was empty, right? And there are so many things like that, and when you look at your beliefs, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because there are pieces of your belief paradigm that are unsustainable. It doesn't mean all of it has to go.
Yeah.
And there are ways to fill in those spots with things that are principle-based rather than dogma-based.
Right.
Like being intellectually honest.
Yeah.
Right? Every Christian I would think, have to admit that Jesus would want us to be intellectually honest.
As honest as
as honest as we can be.
Yeah, but I also think go on any church website that's not Suncoast and under their statement of beliefs. If they are a fundamental it doesn't even have to be a fundamental evangelical church. It just has to be a Christian church.
Yeah.
Every single statement of belief has the Bible infallible and perfect, without error. Now that's subject to interpretation. What do they mean by that?
Right.
Does it
Which
mean
of course is ambiguous.
Exactly. There's an ambiguity to some of the statements, without error, meaning it was purposeful to have
the errors that it does have.
Correct.
Yeah.
But again, when you place your entire belief system on the Bible being the perfect word of God, and there's so many errors in there, not just in contradicting stories of who came to the tomb first, but it's there are people that their Christian faith solely relies on the creation story. Like they cannot let that go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be the earth has to be 6,000 years old. The earth has to have been created in seven days. Noah had to physically build that ark and bring all the animals, even though we just know that those things are not physically, humanly possible.
Right.
Those things have to be true. And I've seen a lot of workaround from apologists. One of my favorites was okay, we know that the earth is 6,000 years old, and we know that it was created in 7 days. And I know that conflicts with the science behind the earth, but you know what? God lives outside of time. So maybe if, 1 day for God is 1 billion years. And so that's why it could, so it's there's
these attempts to jump through hoops
or placing of the dinosaur bones in the ground by God.
Yeah.
God didn't create the trees from seed; they were full-grown trees. So, so it's workarounds like that. That I just, if you can let those things go, I think you can spend less time defending your faith and more time
growing into it
and acting those principles out.
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah, so important. But it does take courage.
Yeah.
And I want to recognize that. And you should recognize that in yourself.
Yeah.
If you've taken that courageous step to admit things that we know are true and that the Bible doesn't affirm those truths. Mm-hmm. It's okay though.
Yeah.
It's all right. Maybe it comforts people to know that the authors of those stories, we can tell from even just the genre, right? Let's use the flood story, for example. The way that the flood myth is told shares a lot in common with the Mesopotamian, Babylonian flood myth.
There's flood myths in a lot of different religions.
Oh, yeah, all over the world.
We're starting to find more and more evidence of
physical evidence
of an actual
a global,
not fully worldwide, but definitely
all the coastlines.
A lot of
for sure.
Yeah,
400 feet.
There's a reason why there's a flood myth in just in Judeo-Christian religion. There's a lot.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Almost every culture you find has a flood myth.
Yeah.
Right? So something happened.
Yeah.
But myths are written to give expression to things that we have a difficult time giving expression to.
Yeah.
So we do it in narrative form, and things like moral points and spiritual wisdom, patterns that are always true. Forgiveness always leads to healing would be one, right? And if you can, like you said, stop wasting time defending these stories as literal and start seeing these stories for the way the author meant them to be read.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not even saying people throughout history did that. Early peoples definitely took these things as fact.
Sure.
But they also, all of the thinkers that you can read to this day, where we have their writings preserved, all of them, I can't think of a single exception, did not view those stories as literal.
Yeah.
So early fathers, whatever, right? Origen, Augustine, Tertullian, you can name any one of them. I can point out places where that they said, of course, this is figurative. Okay. Paul tells the story of, anyway. So, if you can do that, then you can spend time with those stories and have them actually rebuild something sustainable through those stories, because they are brilliant stories.
Well, and that was one thing I was going to add, that something that really, because that during my deconstruction, I threw away my Bible. Like, it was like, this is complete BS. Like, I don't need this thing. Yeah. And then Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures made me fall back in love with them. Yeah, great. They're great. If you really like want to have a deep understanding of the beauty behind, especially these older, like Genesis stories.
Myths, yeah.
Wow, does he do an in-depth?
Man, he really does.
You have to set aside a lot of time, because they're very long. But he does a beautiful job of making you fall in love with the Bible again.
Yeah,
and it helped me. It helped Ryan. Like, it helped a lot of people. Like, if you have the time, if you have a job that you can listen to things while you're working, like, man, that one reignited my love for the Bible, because there is so much beauty in the imagery that we miss. You know, it's like I love Larry's line, I'm more concerned with what the Bible means, not with what it says.
Yes.
And I think Jordan Peterson does a brilliant job of diving into what do these stories mean.
And it's not theological in nature either. It's psychoanalytical, really. That's what he is. And for those of you who have a problem with Jordan Peterson for other reasons, I get it, some of it. It doesn't change the fact that he really did a brilliant job with those that biblical series, for sure. I think he's still doing some.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So don't throw that baby out with the bathwater.
I think that you should not just listen to people that you agree with. No. I think that is a really, really bad point in our culture right now. It's like, I'm only going to read things or hear things that I agree with. And
because it's so hard to stay in an echo chamber, we work hard at building one.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. No, I think the only way we grow as humans is hearing opposing ideas. So, like you said this earlier in the podcast, what you did with when you were talking about not creation, but the universe and the fine tuning. Yeah. Like, you went and tried to find the steelman argument against your argument.
Yeah.
That's what we should be doing. We should always be looking to steelman the other opposing argument in any belief that we have. Because it's easy to straw man argument.
Oh, yeah.
It's super easy. Like, I believe this, I'm going to straw man the opposing argument.
Yeah.
No. I want to hear the steel man argument, because that tells me, and I ask that a lot of people that have different political, theological, or philosophical ideas. I ask them if they were talking and they say a pretty...
straw man.
No, just like a statement like, I believe X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I'll ask them, what's the best argument against that?
Oh, yeah, that's
And
good.
if they don't have that, I said, you haven't thought about that enough.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to do a new series, and I'm really struggling with how to do this. But I've done a lot of research, a lot of reading into something that doesn't actually have a name. So I'm calling it Solistic Progression Spirituality. I know that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But it really focuses on near-death experiences and the data collected over the last, well, the 20th and 21st century, since we've had the technology to revive people and their experiences and all the common threads. So we said the common thread of the Gospels is that the tomb was empty. Mm-hmm. Same thing happens in this research, right? Only you have thousands of witnesses, not 4. Mm-hmm. And in deep trance hypnosis cases, thousands of cases. There are a few significant doctors that have participated in that research, and what people see in the spiritual world and how they line up with. There are so many common threads between that and near-death experiences, and even psychedelic research. And I want to do that to help people to, I know it's going to scare some people because it's going to mess with paradigms of belief. Mm-hmm. But it also affirms a lot of what people believe in their major religions, not just Christianity, but Eastern religions as well, Islam.
Yeah, there's plenty of
Judaism,
religions. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are a lot of common threads. And doesn't it make sense for us to look at data-driven research, right, for our spirituality if there's stuff available? And there is. Mm. So I think this can help people to rebuild something sustainable. Keep looking for that data-driven information. Mm-hmm. And that's going to change over time because we just keep getting better and better at collecting data.
Right.
And there are literally universities like the University of Virginia. They've done a multiple-year study on near-death experiences.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to ascertain, what are they doing as scientists? They're trying to figure out if there's a way to prove that there is an afterlife. And the evidence definitely weighs in with, yes, there is an afterlife. Okay. And there are a lot of common threads there that align with your Christian beliefs if you're a Christian. So I think that that's helpful too. Scary? Yeah. Yes. Muster the courage, baby.
Yeah.
Because if you can be courageous, and that's an attribute that we all want. If you can be courageous about this, you're going to end up with something way richer, way more sustainable, and a love too.
And to be very clear on courage, like courage doesn't mean to be without fear. No. It's just not allowing that fear to overtake you and keep you in a position where you don't move.
Exactly. Keep you in bondage.
Exactly.
And that's what fear does.
100%. And that's what breaks my heart with people that I know if they really spent the time to really be honest with themselves, they would let go of some things that are keeping them in bondage. But that ultimate fear of getting it wrong, because like that's always the question, right? It's like, well, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong?
Yeah.
And you just screwed yourself, and you're spending eternity in hell.
Of course,
it always comes back to hell.
The first courageous question there would be, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What if you're wrong? What if they're wrong and they're teaching me something that's leading me astray? The next logical question should be, what if I'm wrong and what I believe leads me astray?
Yeah.
My experience, for what it's worth, with the God that I have grown to love more than I ever have in my life, is that you don't have to fear him. You don't have to fear him that way.
Yeah.
Is he authoritative, like you were describing earlier? Yes, he is. Mm-hmm. He, she, it, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's love.
Yeah.
It's love.
Yeah.
And I think that these things that we've talked about can be really helpful for people that have already had the courage to question themselves in their beliefs, to rebuild something with as little suffering as possible, as little angst as possible.
There's going to be, though.
There's going to be some. Yeah.
And it's different for everyone. And if you're local here in Sarasota, you have a great resource in Suncoast.
You really do.
But one thing I would add to kind of just if we're going over general advice for anybody going through a deconstruction, one thing at least that helped me was I never stopped talking to God. Even in my disbelief, I never stopped talking to God. And I always thought of I think it's the Job story, to where it's like God, like you hear all of these terrible prayers that he prays. And
He was
at the
brutally
end,
honest with God.
yeah, and even at the end, God says, Job has honored me. I think it's Job, right?
Yeah.
And so he's like, Job has still honored me. And you're like, well, he said some pretty horrific things to you. How has he honored you?
Yeah.
And I think the difference is that he never stopped praying.
And he was honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, because it's like some people like, I don't know what it is. It's like, if you believe in an omnipresent, all-knowing God, why would you lie in your prayer?
Yeah.
Why would you
are just lying to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah.
Why would you? So there have been so many moments in my prayer, like in praying, in meditation, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes you feel comfortable. In those quiet times that I truly, truly feel like God's whispering to me something, or comforting me, like in the best way, like everything's going to be okay. It's, yeah, like that experience of just like comfort and knowing like you're not alone. I'm here. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you I'm with you by the people that are around you.
Or some other way.
Yeah.
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 So it's
good.
Again, that line, the Holy Ghost keeps haunting me. I can't let it go.
Yeah.
I can't let it go.
Me too, man. Me too. Well, thanks for talking to me about this and the other ways that you've contributed to this series. And I'd love to hear from even more people. I've heard a lot of feedback on this, and it's all been very positive. Yeah, maybe we'll revisit it sometime. There's always new stories. So
100%.
yeah. Thanks, man. Love you.
Love you too, man. Thank you.